2,000 years ago, when Christ was born, the Jewish religion had, for the most part, fallen into a condition of externalism. Concepts and principles were neglected. There was very little emphasis placed on issues like matters of the heart. Religious requirements almost entirely centered on actions and duty, prompting Jesus to make such statements as, if your righteousness doesn't exceed that of the Pharisees, then you cannot enter the kingdom. In his teachings were statements like, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say, if you lust on a woman, you've already committed adultery in your heart. He was saying, don't commit the act, but there is another issue, that is a matter of your heart. It's not right. And he told that Samaritan woman that God was looking for people who would worship him in spirit. In other words, it was not sufficient that people would bring a lamb up to a specific mountaintop there to be slaughtered in order to just perform a duty. You must have a heart after God. And in a direct face-to-face confrontation with the Pharisees, he once brought up the issue of tithing and basically said, don't stop tithing, but don't think that your meticulous attitude toward percentages is going to be a substitute for your awful lifestyle. He said in Matthew 23, basically, you've killed the prophets I've sent to you, and given 10% out of your garden of herbs is no excuse for that. It's a wonderful chapter. Matthew 23, read that. It's very enlightening. With that said, let's turn to our topic for the day. And that is that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. He was walking around among that generation, and they rebuked him or scolded him for not keeping the Sabbath. He was the Lord of the Sabbath, and they had the audacity to rebuke him for not keeping it. According to historians, there was little emphasis placed on the concept of the holiness of rest and the fact that God sanctioned regular rest. If asked the meaning of the Sabbath, some today would probably answer that you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath day, and that's about all of the understanding they have of that day and of that concept. But God said, keep this day holy. Take time out of your week to give thanks to your Creator, to spend time with your family, to stop bouncing around between activities long enough to meditate on God's promises and remember that you've been set free and delivered. Many professed Christians today still miss that point. They drive themselves and everyone around them into a frenzy. They're hateful and grouchy and worried about every little issue and condemning everyone around them, and well, they act like they're demon possessed, and the truth is they need a real good night's rest. In fact, heaven calls for rest for individuals, for foreigners, for slaves, even for the livestock, and even the land under that Old Testament system had a Sabbath. And of course, human being or human nature being what it is, fallen in a state of sin, we're all about challenging God some way. So the ancients were apparently more concerned with how to get around that commandment than they were keeping it, which keeping it would have invigorated their spirits and refreshed their bodies and renewed their vision. What we really want to know, they were saying, is what kind of work can we do and still be in legal outward conformity to this law? What is the letter of the law? The great historian Emil Schur records many of the teachings of the Pharisees, and he said that they determined there were 39 types of work that they were prohibited from doing on the Sabbath day. And each of those 39 types, according to Mr. Schur, required extensive definitions and explanations and, of course, detail of the exceptions. And some of their reasoning can only be described as preposterous. It would range from such things as it was prohibited to tie a knot unless you could tie the knot with one hand and untie it with one hand to writing a letter. It was prohibited to write a letter unless you were just writing two specific letters of the alphabet. You could write one with your left hand and one with your right hand, and that was acceptable. It was prohibited to extinguish a light just to save the oil or to save damage to the wick. That was prohibited, but if you were afraid that an evil spirit might find you, then it was permissible to go ahead and extinguish the light. And there was a great debate that raged between rabbis concerning a man with a wooden leg. Was it permissible on the Sabbath day for him to go outside using his peg leg? And one school of thought said it was permissible for him to do so. Another one said, no, it's not permissible for him to go outside wearing his wooden leg because he would be carrying a burden and that would be prohibited. And for some strange reason, I always think of some poor guy trying to go out for a little breath of fresh air, looking for a shade tree to rest in, and he's dragging himself across his yard while his peg leg is lying on the porch. That doesn't seem to be very spiritual to me. And the truth about the Sabbath, if you ignore that great commandment of Exodus 20, you're going to wither away. Your body will suffer, your business will suffer, your relationships will suffer, your spirit will die. You'll miss the promises of God for your life if you ignore the Sabbath. But the greatest truth about the Sabbath, it's not just one day of the week. The true Sabbath, according to Hebrews chapter 4, is the gospel. In fact, it says that we who've believed have entered into rest. If you're not in Christ, there is no Sabbath. There's no rest. And can I tell you that this world is going to wear you out? You'll be dead before your time. You'll be lonely. You'll be defeated. You'll be in despair. But if you're in Christ, if you know Christ, then there's a rest for you. You may or may not have obtained it, but it's available. 1 Peter chapter 1 said, cast all your cares on him, for he careth for you. What has you worried today? What has you exhausted? What steals your peace of mind? Is it your children or your business or your health or the conditions of the world? Well, if you have Jesus, you have a Sabbath. You have a rest. So go ahead and avail yourself of that rest. Turn to Jesus. He'll give you peace and he'll give you rest because he is the Sabbath, and that is the right direction. God bless.